And so we get to the Rob Zombie reimagining of John Carpenter's Halloween. Now, I went to see this film when it originally came out at the cinema. I went with a friend of mine, good friend of mine, who he loves that first film. He likes all of them. He's always been a fan of Halloween, and yeah, I wanted to walk out of this, I've got to say, when we watched it. But I didn't have the heart to tell him because I knew he was a big Halloween fan. And to be honest, I'd already requested that we walk out of The Devil's Rejects when we went to see that. Something he didn't want to do. But yeah, I'm not a fan of Rob Zombie, I've got to say. At least the first time when I went to see this, I'd have said flat out, I'm not a fan of Rob Zombie. So I was a bit dubious about coming back to this because, like I said, I've not seen it since. I kind of had no reason to until I started this series. I mean, my memories of it from that first viewing were just that, that first half hour is showing us things that, quite frankly, did we really need to see? And the first film, the original film, kind of worked without all that stuff, and it I think worked in many ways a lot better as a result of not showing us that stuff, because you have to kind of imagine it all. You have to imagine what is going on. And there was a bit more of a supernatural element to that original film. You felt like Michael was actually being guided by some kind of evil force that maybe he didn't have control of. Whereas this film leaves nothing to the imagination. But hey-ho, you know what? You got to take it for what it is, which is a reimagining. If Zombie had have just done a complete rehash the exact same way, then we'd be sat here complaining about it, how it's just a complete rehash and does nothing new. So yeah, like it or loathe it, you kind of got to give Rob Zombie credit for at least doing something different. Now the thing is, watching it again for this review, for this the second time round, I actually didn't mind it all that much. In fact, I would say it's not half bad, maybe even good. It's got issues, believe me, it's got issues. It ain't perfect, not by a long stretch, but it ain't quite the monstrosity I remember it being either. Now there are things about it that I still don't like. There are certain moments of violence where I just feel it's completely unnecessary, and you can argue this is a slasher movie, it's all unnecessary, but particularly the rape scene. Now, this is the scene that in cinemas, when I got to this point, that's when I was done. I wanted to leave, and I happened to get a phone call while I was sat there in the cinema. Now, I never have my phone on loud. I have it on vibrate, and I felt it vibrating in my pocket, and I'm like, I got to get out of here. I've got a call to take. And I literally didn't come back in from that call until a good 40 minutes. So I completely missed the fact that Dee Wallace was in this film. A bit of a favourite of mine. She's in Critters, she's in E.T., she's in The Frighteners, she's very good in The Frighteners, although that film hasn't dated particularly well. But yeah, I really like Dee Wallace. Cujo as well, another one of hers I like. So yeah, to see her in this time around, because I actually got to see it, was quite a surprise, and I like her here. So yeah, but that scene again, for me, the rape scene, still, I question why it's there. Now, I think I see what Rob Zombie's doing with that scene. In the slasher genre, we kind of got to a point, certainly after the first film in a franchise, you get to a point where the killer kind of becomes the hero. And then you start setting up these characters for them to knock down, which you're quite happy to see them get knocked down during the film. And I feel like that's what they're doing here. They want us to be revved up about Michael Myers killing these two guys who raped this woman, so that when he kills someone that has treated him with respect, then it becomes more of a shock. But it just doesn't work for me. You can have a relationship where someone has treated him with respect, and you can have Michael Myers kill that person, and I would still feel a little bit heartbroken over the fact he's killed that person. You don't need to show me the scum of the earth doing the most vilest thing in order for me to make that connection, and certainly on repeat viewing, you know what's going to happen anyway, so again, you just don't need it. it's gratuitous for the sake of it. And I just, yeah, I hate that scene. Also, at the beginning, when we see Myers' family, Michael Myers' foster dad and his real mum, the way they speak to each other, the way they shout at each other all the time, and the language they come out is just constant obscenity. That was one of the things that put me off right off the bat when I watched it first time around as well. Now, thankfully, it's not like that all the way through the film. That toned down, because what Rob Zombie is obviously trying to get us to see is that Myers comes from this pure white trash, broken home of degenerates. His mother tries, you can tell his mother loves him, but just because of the lifestyle she leads and the people she's with, she can't do that to the best of her ability. So I get it. I get why that language is there. He really wants to hammer home the environment that Michael Myers is living in, the thing that turns him. But I don't know that it needs to be as coarse as it is. But that being said, I did appreciate it more this time round. I get it, And when we do go to Haddonfield in the later years, once Michael Myers has grown up, and we see other people, the way they interact with each other, normal families, Laurie Strode's family, the relationship she has with her parents is completely different. And you can see her parents talk to each other with respect. They don't use profane language and this, that, and the other. They're a normal family, you can see the contrast there. So I get that. I get what Rob Zombie's doing there, and I think I appreciate it a bit more than I did the first time around. Now, the film does go on for far too long. The bit when they get to the pool at the end, there's this pool, it's got no water in it. But yeah, they kind of kill Michael Myers in that pool, and you think it's all over. And then all of a sudden he comes back and we have another 20 minutes of film. And I really feel that 20 minutes just isn't needed. I like what they do with Laurie Strode when they have her pulling the gun on Myers and essentially blowing his head off. That's a good ending. But you could have cut all that stuff out in between. You could have had that happen in the pool. Scout Taylor-Compton as Laurie Strode is pretty decent in this. Now, I think towards the end of the film, I've read reviews and things, other people's thoughts on it, and one thing seems to be clear is that a lot of people get a bit sick of her screaming towards the end. But if I was in that situation, I'm not sure I'd be any different. It didn't bother me, to be honest. I didn't really notice it when I was watching the film. It felt like a natural reaction to the situation she was in. It was only when I read some reviews afterwards that that got pointed out to me. But I was fine with it, didn't notice it. I thought she was really good as Laurie Strode. And I think she has to do some stuff in this film that maybe Jamie Lee Curtis didn't have to do in her role, because I think this film is a lot more intense. It certainly goes for scares a bit more, I think, whereas the original was all about atmosphere, creating the atmosphere. I obviously still think the original film is better than this. While I think this is much better on this second viewing to how I originally remember it, I still don't think it's a great film. I don't think it's a classic, but I would say it's a good one. When I first saw this, I wasn't so keen on the idea of making Michael Myers so huge. It's like the Norman Bates thing. You look at the original and the remake. Not that Vince Vaughn is a huge guy, but he's tall. It's certainly imposing. Whereas you look at Anthony Perkins, he's just not at all. He was this kind of short, thin waif of a man, and that kind of made it more scary that he was behind this. Not that Michael Myers in the original was a waif, but he just looked like an average kind of man, and that to me felt a bit scarier. Now, certainly if I met Tyler Mane down a dark alley coming towards me with a Michael Myers mask on, I would be bricking it. And I think that's kind of the approach that Zombie is going for here. He wants absolute menace, and Tyler Mane has that. I just feel like it's overkill. I don't think you need that. I think it's, hammering something home a bit too hard. Sherry Moon Zombie isn't quite as bad as I remember her being either. She plays Michael Myers' mum. You can tell she's not an actor by trade. She didn't get into the business with any great desire to become an actress, but she does okay. I've seen her in other things and I really don't like her, but here she's not half bad. She's not quite as good as everyone else she's going up against on screen, but she acquits herself well enough. Now, Brad Dourif is a favourite of mine. I really love this guy, and it's nice to see him playing a normal kind of person. You know, he's playing a sheriff with no kind of dark side, no twisted sensibilities. He's actually just a decent man being a sheriff. So that's quite, yeah, it's quite an odd thing to see, because when you see Brad Dourif on screen, you kind of expect something sinister to lie underneath. Very good to see Danielle Harris in this film as well. I completely forgot that she was in this. Now I think she's actually quite a standout when she's on screen. When she's attacked in the house, I really buy her reactions. That moment when she's lying on the floor, she sells it. She really does. She's an incredible actress. You know, she always has been from such a young age, and it just boggles my mind that most moviegoers probably wouldn't even know who she is, because she's so tied to the horror genre. It would be really nice to see her get into other kinds of movies and get that profile beefed up, because she absolutely deserves it. She's got some talent. And finally, we have Malcolm McDowell as Dr. Sam Loomis. Now, I like him here, but I don't think he's quite as good as Donald Pleasence. I think Donald Pleasence did make that role his own, certainly in the first film, and I will freely admit, as I've already said in previous videos, that as the films wore on, so did he, quite frankly. But I think that's just because of what they did with the character. Repetition, it got old real fast. But in that first film, if we're just comparing these first films, for me, Donald Pleasence takes it. But I think that McDowell acquits himself quite well in a role which obviously is quite iconic amongst horror fans. I think that Rob Zombie's strength is as a director. He's very visual, he's very good at building tension. This film is tense for pretty much most of its running time, to be honest. But what he isn't good at is scripts. Now, I would love to see Zombie tackle a script that he didn't write, providing he doesn't change the dialogue. You know, give him a script by a good writer and let him put his visuals to it. I think, yeah, like I say, here the film looks beautiful despite some of the ugliness that is going on screen. But that's scripting, you know. While I think the second half he does better at, I think that the dialogue tones down a bit, becomes a bit more realistic, particularly the relationship between Laurie Strode and Tommy, you know, when she's doing the whole babysitting stuff. That relationship feels very natural. I'd love to see more of that kind of stuff from Rob Zombie and less of the stuff that we see at the beginning where it's just F, you know, and I switch off to that after a while. It just makes me shut down. So yeah, you know, not a classic, but not the travesty I remember it being either. I give this a 3 out of 5. But what about you? Have you seen this film? And if so, what did you think about it? And how do you think it compares to John Carpenter's original? Comment below, let me know. And until next time, cracking.